I'm Lorna Sikorsky. For those of you who don't know me, my company is LDS and Associates, and I'm here in the capacity of author and uh, publisher to announce a product. What should we call this, Marge? Maybe a product relaunch,
I was just going to say
rethink of a product that is now tooled very specifically for the 21st century, and that you should be able to very seamlessly use all of the items in the M.I.A.E. with virtual clients as we have here now. And that still seems to be, according to my universities that use our books, Marge, still seems to be the case for at least one more semester. And they're not even having their students come in for texts. They are asking for e-editions, which is interesting. They are doing that now. Anyway, you know about me. I'd like to introduce Marge. I haven't been able to see you at all through this whole COVID mess. No conferences, no meetups or meet and greets or anything. So I'm so glad to see you here. And I thought this publication has been out a while, Mastering Idioms, as it says, of American English. I probably technically might want to say North American English, but at the time that was the full acceptable jargon for this. But it is used by our Canadian clients as well, primarily because we don't get that slangy in this, as you'll find out soon. But Marge, can you kind of give a summary of why we did this book to begin with?
Yes, it's great to see you too, Lorna. I believe that at the time we were both seeing a lot of clients who were doing well with their vowel and consonant pronunciation and intonation, and yet there was still something lacking, and we weren't quite sure what it was. I always describe it as they had the cake, but they didn't have the icing on the cake. And we just decided that this is a great way to reinforce the pronunciation work that we were doing, while also helping them become more familiar with the myriad of expressions that we use in English, and so they could incorporate it into their speech, into their writing, be able to understand their coworkers more easily. So it just seemed like a natural evolution of the work that we had done before, and it was really exciting to do it. Yeah.
And can you give a brief continuation, if you will, as to what else has occupied? I think this was your first joint publication, right? Or was it your first publication period, this one that you did with me, and then you went on further from that? Just kind of give them a bit of info about that, because the materials are still in our store also.
Oh, thanks. So yes, Lorna, you were my mentor, and it was wonderful working with you on this project. And then I collaborated with Linda Katz-Wilner, and she had done some work with medical terminology, pronunciation, and we just kind of developed so many products around stories, sound-loaded stories, and the rules of American English. So our program called Rules, and then medically speaking rules, and Rules on the Run. We just had a lot of products that came from that. So just building on using these accent issues and incorporating them into more functional scenarios. And so we've developed a lot of products, and thank you for carrying those, again, all available as ebooks, because that's what everyone wants now. So
yeah,
makes it easier.
Or at least that's the first stop. And then it'd be interesting to get some feedback from all of you, whether you're experiencing that. They want the e-editions, but some people just still like to touch paper. Some instructors too, or just have at their side. So we have that possibility, but we are pushing the e-editions with the things that I've noted that people want to be able to print anyway. And that's what the whole point of the teacher toolbox, I have to get used to the new name, teacher toolbox was. So what I'd like to do today is talk about this toolbox, because what it does, in addition to giving the instructor the original or full retail edition of volume 1 for front vowels, and volume 2 for our colored vowels, we'll take a peek at those, was to augment that with other elements. All right, so let's go ahead and do a deep dive into this new product. As you can see on the cover, we're calling it the Teacher Toolbox, and change the name actually, Marge, because there are so many more moving parts to this than were in the past, and we're very excited about all of it. But let me go into some detail about what we're going to see going forward. Briefly, these are the components in it. One is a set of teacher bonus materials, and those are a lot of PDF handouts, some interactive, some just simply things that you want to show on screen. They're not transferable, but they are so helpful with learners, especially online. Then the next element that you get are 2 assessment folders for volume 1. That's the front vowel edition, and volume 2, the R colored edition. Now, these do contain interactive pre-tests with an auto-scored answer sheet and an interactive post-test with the same auto-scored answer sheet. Now, this particular set of assessments can also be freely duplicated for your learners or students in larger classes, or you can use them to deliver the assessments via some media, perhaps email. Then there are learner activities, again, 2 sectors, one for volume 1 and one for volume 2. And these are definitely interactive learner exercises, literally pulled from the volumes, but they are able to be transferred between the instructors and the learners independent of the full e-workbooks. Now, we still assume that the learners have their own editions, but sometimes you want to interact with them in a different way, in a fresh way, and the learners are able to duplicate these and have them on various devices with a different style of marking, perhaps. We'll look at those. And then, of course, the people who own the Teacher Toolbox license can have their own edition of Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, that includes the e-workbooks and the audio files for those workbooks. So let's continue and break this down into some of the moving parts for this. First of all, let's talk about the teacher bonus materials. As I said, these are visuals. And because they're pullouts, I frankly find it much easier to use them online because they are listed by name, and you can just rapidly pull them up, mark them up for different classes, different people, just during the sessions themselves. Of course, if you're teaching live classes, you also probably are still recording live classes, so this is just a lot faster. One of the pluses, and I think things that all instructors need, is a list of the total number of expressions that are in each volume. So we're looking at volume 2 here. It's an alpha list, but notice that we have preserved some of the intonation markings, and that would be the different color that tells you where the stress goes. It's just a fast track look at it. The students themselves don't necessarily need that. They have that in their book. But another nice thing is to dig in and find out where exactly it is in the edition. So that's a good quick reference. Then we have the pullouts of just the exercise one. And Marge, this is one of the most important elements of that a whole M.I.A.E. series, the way we organized it in terms of having a place for doing some actual writing of your own examples, and that's uh, there as well, but also to give them a quick definition and an actual social and business version. And that's a great thing also to be able to have.
I wanted to mention that this ability to give feedback to the clients is just a wonderful way to customize the program even more and make them accountable, because a lot of times you might assign an assignment to a client and then you're not really sure if they've actually done it, but when they can email it easily back and forth, there's that accountability element as well.
Well, in addition to that, there are also the guides for the editions. And like the M.E.E.C., we tried to preserve and keep the family of iconing very similar so that it would operate well between the two programs. But just a reminder that this is an interactive document, and you actually fill in the blanks for the students, or they do it. Could be, it's a great interactive device and group brainstorming to come up with personal keywords for each of the vowel sounds. And this becomes a quick reference sheet because it's a one pager that they can put on their own phone and have their references. And why is this valuable? Well, uh, especially if they are doing the practicum on the audio files, it's nice to have a quick reference while you're listening as to what your keyword is for each of the vowels in the program itself. Then we also have the consonant keywords guide. And once again, you can establish these as a communal brainstorming in small groups, or between you and the single learner, you might come up with keywords that are relevant for each of the consonant sounds, or just the ones that come up during your program, because the emphasis is on the vowels, but the consonants become very integral during the look-see at the intonation elements, not only to establish, once again, what are their best versions of all of the intonation, 8 different patterns that we utilize in the M.E.E.C. The iconing is exactly the same, but it gives them a great way to put that information in and again have a cheat sheet. This is probably one of the best elements that Marge and I came up with, and that is the whole idea of let's define how linking goes. And so we have in the volume, and this is also on audio, to introduce it conceptually, not just the practicum, but also I would call it the lecturette information is recorded. But it has a symbol for what happens across transitions. And for example, it's not a crack up, it's a crack cup. Probably not that sharp, but something to that effect. Or how do you handle voicing, etc. All of these become markers. Well, then the next chunk of detail in the toolbox is the assessment folder, one for volume 1 and one for volume 2. So there are 2 folders, and these are indeed interactive post-tests and pre-tests. This is such a blessing. We always had an assessment for this that essentially tests their knowledge of all of the expressions, looking at them in terms of seeing a bold-faced expression and choosing which possibility matched it best. So I just got a question about that. What's different about the pre-test and the post-test? The post-test is set up in one organizational sequence. The post-test is the same, but they're all mixed up. So we do have some attempt to make it slightly different. This is you can use these in so many different ways. Those of you who are in a group class could actually display the page, and they could in turn simply mark their printed answer sheet, which you can disseminate, or you can have them put their, and then you can, of course, in the teacher bonus demo materials, we have the answer keys, and you can have that up on screen and have them score their own, or you can use this to score print versions. But what I hope more people would consider reasonable to use is the interactive score form, which they could save the file to their name. The pre-test and the post-test are separate. And as they go putting in the check marks, they are filled in on the answer sheet, and they simply get a raw score of, and it's a great way to check for objective measurement of understanding of the expressions pre and post your efforts. So it's turned out to be a great adjunct, very fast. There's a question, how long does this take? I think if you are talking about someone who actually knows the expressions quite well, for example, if you took it, the average time would be somewhere in the 30-minute range, and then it goes down from there. We have not done any studies of the timing, so I would generally suspect it would be reasonable to say it's less than an hour. Uh, but we don't have the data on the how much time it takes to complete it. Well, the next big chunk in the toolbox, as we said, you had demo materials, you had assessment folders, and now you have learner activity folders for volume 1 and volume 2. Now, these again are separate folders because they're interactive exercises from the volumes that can be transferred back and forth between you and your learners, and it can be independent of the full workbooks. So, someone also asked, well, how do you transfer the workbooks? How do you do it? Generally speaking, my clients open up the ebook and put in their license number on a slot, interactive slot on the first page, and then save it to their name. And from that point, we use their edition. Of course, I always have my personal trainer edition, which we can mark up for a lot of other issues, or I can mark up on a week by week basis. I can do anything I want with that. But this way, if we use it in class and use all of the nice Adobe tools at your disposal, then that is something that really broadens your flexibility. Well, we also have discussion questions. And I think I'll toss this back to Marge here to give us more information about that.
As far as the discussion, I think just taking what they've learned and using it spontaneously, I believe was the point of that one, Lorna.
Yes.
Just being able to remove it from a more structured situation. Just how can I use this expression when I'm just having a conversation with someone unstructured, and feeling comfortable enough to use it.
And here are some more samples of those discussion questions from the other volume. And learners can really use these pullouts as a quick reference guide on any device. And sometimes you need a refresher, or you might want to update the keywords that they have here. And then you can review the expressions in terms of, as we note, we are looking at it grammatically to a degree by calling some expression actions because they focus on the verb. And then there are the gambits, which are your pragmatic power tools. Examples here: in the meantime, you may or may not agree. Those are set aside commentary. And then we have descriptor expressions. So what uh, we found it was problematic to just say, oh, these are uh, adjective phrases, these are verb, these are, I don't know what I would have called them, but it just broadened our ability to use them, and it kept the literal grammar out of the mix, and I found it was easier for the clients to use them. An important tool here, as we may have said earlier, is sometimes you know the expressions, but you don't know what to put after it in terms of what kind of object does it take. Uh, is there a preposition involved? Do we need it at all? And then the verb, we talked about this piece of cake one earlier. Well, here are some examples from other vowels. The I vowel has, as you can see, far more in it. Some expressions, some vowels, you realize just how many basic expressions. Here's the vowel, how many basic expressions one can have for that. Descriptors, as I said, I think this has stood up quite nicely in terms of drawing a balance between something that is too slangy and something that becomes really the workhorse expressions. And finally, the vowel. Just thought we'd run through the front vowels. Well, then finally, you have your own edition of Volume 1, which is the front vowels. We've seen some examples from that, and Volume 2. And again, these ebooks are full interactive editions. And when the learners have them, they can also download them on up to 3 different devices. People tend to put the audio practice strictly on their phones generally and use them that way, but they are intended to be editions. And I think that is working well when clients realize that, or let's call them more broadly, learners realize that there are printable editions of critical things like the exercise 1 from each edition. Um, the other exercises in it, they might be matching, they might be multiple choice that are also in it. the answer keys are right in the book. So the critical components of the volumes are something that can be printed. All the key codes are printed. The first page of every unit, you can deliver to them the broad strokes of what is going to be covered in the unit. Here's your expressions. Here's your cheat sheet for intonation for that list of expressions for vowels and for linking and unique intonation parameters. So with that, I think there's less of a need to have print editions. Someone was just asking about whether we still have the print. We do, but that is becoming less and less of an issue. I've been watching the universities continuing education programs throughout the country during this pandemic, and I have still some who come back and want print for an isolated few, but with the elements that they can print from the book themselves, that does it. Plus, you have such a nice, rich look and feel, and many navigation hops around. We've tried to really use all the um Adobe annotation tools, which I hope you are becoming more familiar with as well. Those are all free tools for Reader as well. So I think the more you practice with them, the better. But there are quite a few tools, and one of the nice ones, as I mentioned, is the ability to mark up without necessarily using the interactive pieces. So to that end, I'd like to just simply show you one more thing, and that's a client folder that I have. So let me pull that up on screen. In the meantime, I'll look and see if there are other questions. All right, so here I've opened up a volume of one of my learners, and this file is saved to their name. And generally speaking, when they get their materials downloaded, we try to use them in the sessions. And by personalizing them and saving it once with their name, we can continue to save it to their name and generally plus a date, so they keep preferring the new volume. So I would have them put in their license number so they have it, and then move on from there. I did want to show you some of the markup tools and just how I would be using it in the sessions. I have told you that, let's see if we can make this a bit larger on screen. I try to not spoon feed them necessarily, especially after they get going, and especially in exercise 1, where as you saw, we want them to generate their own conversational sentences in their own voice for a social and a business situation. And then they can either send back the entire book, or sometimes we have them with the new system just send the exercise 1 files so that they're pull out away from the material. Depends on what I want out of the book for the student or learner. If we want a permanent record within the book, it's best to, of course, put the sentences there, but you have so many different ways you can use them. But by not spoon feeding them, I am utilizing the tools that are in Adobe, as you can see at the bottom here, and I can have them change their answers without necessarily giving the details to them. So I have little notes here you can take a look at. I read their sentences and I said, the noun expression that he used with a different lifestyle uh, was the appropriate answer, not living style, which is what he had at first. So I had him corrected. And if we accept it, which we will this week, I will get rid of the box. And he has, save it again, he has a permanent record of those examples. If we find an expression he likes really well, we'll also highlight that. That's another example of scoring. I just wanted you to see some how I could put in a text box for this one to go through the mill. I said, for business, you either struggle or you go through the mill. The way he had it was a bit awkward or redundant. And so I'm asking him, can you play with that a little bit more? And these, of course, are from the I expressions in that unit of volume 1. So it's just a way of showing you, again, highlighting things we like. And if I move carefully to the back, he still has to pick answers and fill those in so that he can self-score himself. The sentence completion, Marge, this was another thing we redid. Rather than keep flipping back to the unit page, I found a way to squeeze in all the expressions on this side so they didn't have to keep flipping back and could fill in the blanks here. So again, we have the answer key for these type of expressions. And then again, we have real-time conversations we can play with. And the part I really like is to take a good hard look, not only at the expressions at the beginning of the unit, but at the end and say, well, you don't want to necessarily be compelled to feel like you have to memorize everything. So which of these do you really like? And I have them pull them out, highlight them, and say, okay, these are ones that would be great to commit to memory. Well, that is pretty much where I'd like to pause, and I'm going to go back to the original screen here to alert you that these materials are all in the store very shortly. The pricing is there. The bulk ordering discounts kick in very quickly. Well, at 2 they kick in. Plus, preferred trainers have an additional discount on top of that. The teachers' editions are available separately, as I said, so that you have your own set of materials. And if you're ordering for larger size classes, if a particular program orders 5, let's say 5 to 10 of the programs, whatever they might be, volume 1 or volume 2 for their people, then the instructor edition would be 50% off. If you order 11 or more, the teacher's edition is free. And the licensing issues and all of that is available there. So thanks so much for uh, being patient through whatever tech problems we have encountered today. For some of you, I've tried to answer questions on the road as we went through this walkthrough. I'm wondering if you have any last minute thoughts you'd like to add to this, Marge, and otherwise, I hope to see you again in an event very soon. So Marge, take it away. Any other things you wanted to mention, Marge, as far as what's going on with this?
No, I think I think the teacher toolbox is really, it's a time saver. And again, like I said before, I think it's a great way for you to customize your instruction, for your clients and students to customize their work. It just made, like most of you, I've been on Zoom for the past 20 months. It's just so much easier, to be able to email things back and forth and to have to deal with the old fashioned way. So I think it's a time saver. I think it's, I think these idioms are really important, and Yeah, I think that whole list of all the idioms in one place is really helpful. Like I said, when I run my conversation group, I'm not necessarily working on pronunciation. And so I can just see what idioms I've taught in a given week and highlight them on my own, and just know what I've
Right.
been doing. It's just easy. It makes it easy. And clients seem to love it. They really do. Just working on the idioms is just a really
Oh,
fun
yeah.
thing to do.
I don't think once you provide the rationale and they try one unit worth of exercises, they get it that this isn't just a slang issue, that these are actual pragmatic tools to get people to do what you need them to do. It's an easy grace issue that you're working on.